Well, thank you both for agreeing and being willing to set aside a little time to do this again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for doing this again.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Appreciate it as well.
my pleasure. My pleasure. It's hard to get like a flow of conversation going if we can't hear each other. So,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
yay.
I was like, what? What? What did
What's that again? It's like we're geriatrics already.
Exactly,
Now
exactly.
we have a sneak preview of what it will be like.
And an experience of what will soon be experienced.
It'll be the eyes that go first, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I hope not. I hope the ears go last.
I know, right? So we can enjoy this wonderful music a little bit longer. Well, why don't we start our interview? You feel ready?
Ready.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yay.
One more.
So,
Okay.
welcome to Greg's Fiddle and Adrena Marie of Teething Vales. Greg is on vocals and multiple instruments, and Adrena is on violin. Thank you so much for joining me in our virtual studio.
Thank you for having us. It's
Thank you.
a privilege to be here.
Thank you. So I know that you've heard of Tacoma Radio or Musical Remedies. Could you give listeners a little insight into how you came to discover us or what you know about us?
Yeah, Tacoma Radio is not that far from where I live, so sometimes I can even pick it up on the terrestrial radio dial, and sometimes I just tune in online, and anytime I turn it on, there's always something interesting being played, and it's oftentimes something that I'm totally unfamiliar with, so I learn a lot listening to the channel. And the Musical Remedies program, I think I must have become aware of it just in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe. And I always enjoy the creativity and what you play on the show and the people who you have on to talk with. There's also the Forbidden Alliance show on Sunday mornings, which I'm fond of. And
Great show.
I like, I think on Thursdays they have the Bienvenido al Tango
Yes.
program with the Argentine tango music, which I love, and so many of those records are I don't see them out in the wild too often, so it's nice to just turn on the radio and hear them.
Thank you, Greg, for sharing that. That's my experience with Tacoma Radio too. As a programmer, I'm always turning on the radio and discovering new music from my fellow programmers. And it doesn't matter what time of day, day of week, there's always something really fascinating coming from the community to the community's ears. So thank you for being a listener.
Thank you for making it happen.
So tell us a little bit about Teething Veils, who you are as individuals, maybe what projects you are involved with outside of Teething Veils, how Teething Veils came to be, what your inspirations are, what type of music it is.
Well, Teething Veils started sometime around 2006 or so. I was mostly active in my old band, The Antiques, and after that band ended, I started a band called Silo Halo. And Teething Veils was this thing that I would do when I just wanted to play the songs in a really stripped down way, or when I wanted to play the songs by myself, because they would reveal different things about themselves when I was playing alone versus when I was playing in a band. And it sort of became like a proper band, mostly by accident and very organically over a period of time. It wasn't until I started writing the first full-length album, Velorio, that I realized I would really need other people to help me record these songs. And that was when I started turning to people who I trusted or felt close with, to help me with the arrangements and to record. And nowadays, we have a band of 5 people. We have Shrew on the drums and Craig on the bass and Adrena on the violin and Hester on the cello. And I'm mostly playing guitar and piano. And so we've been rehearsing to record our 5th full-length album. And I also play in a band called Cahotek every once in a while, which is primarily based out of Philly, but also has roots in DC, because we all used to live together at 611 Florida Avenue during the time period when that house was hosting a lot of experimental and abstract and freeform music type of shows that like you would see at Rhizome today. And I also play in a band called Seamstresses.
Sounds like you're very busy. I know you are as well, Adrena.
Yeah, it seems like we're both in three bands. I play with David E. Williams and Jerome Deppie. Floyd Vision is was my main gig. It's actually starting to turn into mainly just a Teething Veils thing. And that would be about it for now. And then I do weddings. I'm in a quartet, so I have a Lord of the Rings quartet wedding coming up, which is a lot of fun.
Oh, fun.
I love doing weddings. But I'm not really from around here. I was born in Las Vegas and still pretty new to the East Coast. So Philadelphia is probably the place I know the best out of all the cities out here.
Well, welcome to the neighborhood. We're happy to have you. So, do you have a particularly special performance or venue from the pre-pandemic times? And what made that experience cool for you? And do you have a dream venue now that live music is reopening that you want to experience?
Well, for me, a lot of my favorite venues in DC are places where it's very, they have very welcoming environments, and it's primarily independently run or run as a cooperative, like Rhizome, of course, the Alice's Jazz and Cultural Society, and there's Frank's Porch over in Mount Pleasant where they have the weekly jazz shows. And that was especially a lifeline during the pandemic, just to be able to be outdoors and hear music being played and being shared. But, you know, and I also like some of the local bars as far as performance spaces go, especially Slash Run and the Mark's Cafe.
Great. Yeah, there's some of those that I've never heard of, like Frank's Porch. I'm gonna have to track down some jazz shows there. Um, yeah, I wish I would have known about that sooner to enjoy during the more when we were more into the pandemic. So, but yes, thank you for shouting out Rhizome. I know this past weekend we just had a huge celebration of Rhizome at that venue, so I share a love for that space as well. Um, do you, speaking of local spaces and faces, do you have some local bands that you'd like to give a shout out to that you particularly are excited about?
There's no shortage of lovely, lovely music around here. Some of my favorite bands are, you know, more AM than FM, whose principal songwriter Selena Bonali also plays in another of my favorite bands, the '06. And I recently just saw the Luke Stewart Trio, which was phenomenal as always. I just picked up the new Public Figures album, which is really, really exciting to listen through. It kind of starts and pummels you in the head and then ends, and it's just really beautifully crafted music. My neighbors have a band called the Electric Grandmother who just played at Slash Run and who were really, really delightful. And Christine, who normally plays as Praxis Cat, released an album during the past year, which was really powerful of an experience for me as a listener, under the name Under Night, and the album's called Ritual of the Forgotten. And it's a very like sprawling, cinematic, epic piece of music. And one of my strongest memories that comes to mind from just before the pandemic was a live set by Black Folks Don't Swim, with a question mark at the end of the name. And they were just an incredible, euphoric live band, and I'm really hoping to hear more recordings from them and to see them live again as soon as possible.
Yeah, my daughter went to a virtual girls rock camp during the pandemic, and Folks Don't Swim question mark were one of the groups of musicians that helped coach the girls for the girls rock camp. So the wonderful, wonderful band. Thank you, Greg, for listing. I'm taking notes of all the bands you listed, and I'm going to be playing many of them after our interview and introduce them to our listeners. So thank you. I appreciate that. And then where and when can listeners see you perform next?
We're playing on Saturday, July 10th at Slash Run. The show starts at 9:30 sharp and runs for 2 hours. And it's Teething Veils and Elena La Fulana, who normally plays with the band Elena y los Fulanos, who are another of my favorite regional acts to see live. And we've never actually played a show together, so I'm really excited about it.
Great. I'm looking forward to that. That was a question I was asking for the listeners' sake because I already knew about that show because I'm going. I'll be
Oh,
there.
great to see
Looking
you.
forward to it. So, Greg, I know that art plays a huge role in your life and your inspiration for music. Can you speak to that for a moment about art influencing Teething Veils?
Very much so. I mean, even the name Teething Veils comes directly from an artist, Marisol Escobar, has been a hugely powerful figure in my life as far as figuring out who I am and how I want to take up space in the world and how I want to make songs. I guess I was about 21 when I really got into her, and I started paying really close attention to these self-portraits that she made where she gave herself sharp teeth and no eyes or matted hair or a veil. And I saw her showing teeth in the work as something similar to how animals in the wild use their teeth both to feed and to nourish themselves, as well as protection from predators. And I also saw her using the veil as a way of controlling what she reveals or conceals about herself in the work. So I just saw it as a really powerful series of statements as far as taking ownership for a person's own output. And so that's, how I came to see songwriting in the same way. And that's why we call ourselves Teething Veils.
That's wonderful insight into you. Thank you for sharing that with our listeners. Adrena and Greg, have you developed any pandemic hobbies or quirks or gained any insights into yourself or the human condition due to these trying, extraordinary times?
Yeah, so I guess I would say I'm actually getting more familiar with being around myself and playing just by myself. Me and I play, like I just loop, parts on top of each other and compose music on my spare time. I find myself just, kind of getting lost and playing music alone a lot. So I'll start something on the keyboard and have that looping, and then I'll play something on the violin, and I'll go over to the drums, or like just walking around the room. I have a room full of instruments, so I'm really grateful to have that. And there's this huge marimba I bought recently that I'm getting used to and loving.
That's
What about
fabulous.
you?
I can say never enough instruments.
No.
Always collect instruments. It's always a good thing.
Yeah.
What about you, Greg?
Well, it's been really similar for me. I mean, I've carved out a lot more room for practicing music and writing and reading and absorbing movies and books and art and other people's music. And also just caring for the home environment, just being here a lot more often than I used to be. I take a lot of solace in sweeping the floor and cutting the vegetables and taking out the garbage and just really, day-to-day household chores. And it's funny because I ended up playing with Adrena during the pandemic because we exchanged a piano that I had to get rid of. I had to move it from this house into her house, and so we
Actually,
just
no,
sort
I
of.
hired a crew to do that part.
Oh yeah, I mean, not like physically,
Yeah.
but it had
I
to
just
be
found him
moved.
randomly on Facebook, and I was like, a free piano, sure, I'll take it. And then I was
Yeah,
like, but
exactly.
I want to know if it works first. So I made him play it for me, and he did a whole video and stuff. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And
And
he could play the piano, and I was like, okay, maybe I should ask him if we should play music. Once I
and
found out he could
Adrena
actually play it.
upgraded the keys of the piano,
Yeah, the
and you
keys were falling
fixed
off.
the sustain pedal. So it's getting a lot more care now, and we just sort of organically started playing together.
Oh, the piano has a backstory. You want to share that?
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
Oh, well, so that piano was, it had originated at some point in, I believe, the New York Opera, and at some point it came to DC to be part of a church, and then it ended up in this house. And the person who used to live here is a musician by the name of Glenn Arnett, who plays keyboards with Herb from Peaches and Herb. And that's also how an old piano that used to belong to Roberta Flack came to be in my house. Because Peaches and Herb and Roberta Flack had all come up in DC in the 70s around the same time, and it just made its way over here from her practice space, and it stays here to this day.
Wow. I, I like to imagine pieces of them and their spirit infused in your music. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Love it when there's a history to the instrument. And the musical remedies program is all about music connecting people, and I love your story of how you two met via a piano with so much history.
Yeah.
Well, I also I can really relate to that pandemic impulse to be alone and find some time and space for yourself, and do those things around the home that become meditative. It becomes less of a rush to run from one place to another. So that's definitely been a relatable silver lining for me as well. Thank you both for sharing that and affirming my experience. So, like I said, musical remedies, it's about music connecting people. It's also about sonic tonics and music as medicine. And I'm wondering what songs during the pandemic have been keeping you afloat, or just music in general that you find to be medicinal.
There's been a lot of it. There's been a lot of stuff that's gotten me through these times, just as any other time in life as well. But particularly, there was something really different, of course, about the last 16 months, to say the least. And there was certain pieces of music that I was finding really meditative and quiet in a way that was also really acknowledging of the longing to connect, or to find something that wasn't there. A lot of Nina Simone's recordings really struck me, especially the song "Lilac Wine." Off, I think her fourth or fifth record. I really just I would put it on. I'd play it over and over again, and just tune in with her vocal, which is I mean, obviously one of the great vocalists ever and
Absolutely.
interpreters of music. And so just having access to that music is such a privilege, and to be able to hear somebody being so in tune with that kind of a yearning, but also very accepting and very meditative about it, was something that I really was struck by in recent months.
Oh, thank you. What about you, Adrena?
So I've been listening a lot to just women singing, because I do that by myself now a lot. And there's a Dior fashion show that just happened, and it's on YouTube if anyone would like to see it. But it's at the original Olympic Stadium in Athens, and it's the most amazing performance I've ever seen in my life. My other bandmate Sherry, she sent it to me, and I was just like shocked at how beautiful they made this like runners fashion show. Um, Along the same lines as that would be Austra from Canada, who Sherry and I were actually supposed to share a stage with during the pandemic, but that canceled all of our plans to go to Mexico and do that. So hopefully next year we can do that. And then I really enjoyed the Andrew Bird, I think it's Pulaski and I song.
I love that track. I love how Andrew Bird uses his instrument in unconventional ways.
Yeah. Yeah, he reminds me a lot of myself. So, yeah,
Great.
I enjoy those.
Well, I'll be playing definitely Pulaski at Night after our interview. So stay tuned, dear listeners, for that. Any other songs you would like to suggest for our listeners, Greg?
Well, I mean, as usual, I've been listening to lots and lots of Lucinda Williams, and particularly the West album. But then also later on, she made this song, "The Ghost of Highway 20," which I witnessed her performing in a living room at the O Street house about 5 years ago, just by good fortune.
I'm so jealous.
It was something I'm really grateful for, certainly, and it just makes me feel like the way she's describing knowing who she is, even after kind of going to hell and back, and you still are who you are, and you can build on your familiar self and strengthen your resolve to live the life that you want. No matter what you go through, in some way or another, who you are is still there in spite of the outside world. So I listen to a lot of Lucinda Williams in general, but especially that Ghosts of Highway 20 really resonates with me.
I love it. You could even name a cat after her. She's so great.
That's right. And, I went to Ruckersville, Virginia on February 25th of this year because another thing that happened to me in the pandemic is at the start of it, I was living with two other human beings. And then by early February of 2021, I had no other human beings who I was living with. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go meet some cats and see if any of them want to come and live with me. So I went to Ruckersville to the Madison Green Humane Society because those were the people who raised my old cat, Empress Josephine, for the first 4 months of her life. And she died in 2013, and for many years I didn't feel like I was really prepared to live with another cat. And so I went down there on February 25th with no plan other than just to meet a cat. And it turned out that two of these cats had been roommates and were friends, and I didn't want to split them up. And then another one of them hadn't been adopted for 2 years, and so I wanted to make sure that she had a home too. So the three of them all came to live with me. And when I met Lucinda, I thought, well, she seemed to be very self-assured, very kind of a rebel, very into living in her own way, regardless of what anybody thinks about it, and very kind of spitfire personality. And so I thought, well, this is Lucinda. And she also made me think of the character Lucinda in the Tom Waits song of that name. Ooh. And so I thought, okay, this is Lucinda right here.
And they turned them all into humans, and now they're all humans.
Well, some people would suggest that cats are better company anyways.
Oh. Sometimes they are.
Sometimes.
Sure.
Yeah.
It can be.
For sure. Any other song recommendations, Adrena or Greg? Because I will be happy to play all of these for listeners after our interview.
Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I think.
Oh, yeah.
The original.
That's a great one.
We might actually perform that as an encore.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. I look forward to hearing that.
And Adrena sings Over the Rainbow really beautifully.
Can't wait to hear it. Well, Greg, Adrena, thank you so much for joining me in the Tacoma Radio virtual studio. One day, when restrictions are lifted a little, you'll have to come and be guests in person. I would love to host you on the
Oh, we would
Musical
love that.
Remedies show. Thank you. Please come. And dear listeners, you can catch Teething Veils July 10th at Slash Run. I will post information about the event on my Musical Remedies with the Night Nurse Facebook page. And stay tuned for some Teething Veils music as well as recommendations from Greg and Adrena. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank
It's a
you.
pleasure to be here.
Pleasure.